Hello, my name is LoG and welcome to another edition of LoG Power-Ups. Today's power-up, we will be focusing on alternate picking by double picking every note of a simple left-hand passage. Let's first check out what this power-up sounds like. Each part will end with a backing track that gradually increases tempo that you can play along with. And this power-up will be split into parts 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the final part where we run the entire thing. As usual, if you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below. And now, let's get started with part 1. Okay, so let's get started with what the right hand is going to be doing here. It's really simple. It's pretty much like I just described. All I'm going to be doing is playing some single notes in my left hand, and every time I play a note, I'm going to be picking that note twice with my right hand, and it will always be a downstroke followed by an upstroke. So it's pretty much, it's going to feel like we're just constantly playing down, up over and over again. So because this is alternate picking, we do need to talk about how to do it smoothly on the string. And I actually talked quite a bit about this in a previous power-up, and that was alternate picking speed burst power-up. I think that was power-up number 3. I'll put the link up top if you want to check it out if you haven't already. And I go pretty deep into pick angle with that particular power-up. I'll just kind of summarize what I talked about in that one. It's pretty much this. Whenever I'm doing this type of exercise or fast alternate picking, I personally like to have a couple different angles going on in my right hand. So for instance, I'll have an angle where I'm tilted forward like this. So if my pick is flat on the strings, I tilt it forward slightly. And it's really just a simple tilt of the thumb like that kind of brings it to that position. And then often, depending on the technique, especially like in this track, I will tilt it downwards like this. This is especially important if your heavy emphasis is a downstroke, which of course we're going to be talking about downstrokes. They're very important. And also if you're palm muting, which is something that I'm going to be doing throughout this whole exercise. And I'll explain here in a second why I'm doing that. But again, that's 2 angles, an angled forward and then an angled down. An angle downward. And of course, you don't have to do this. It's something that I do. I find it comfortable. You can experiment with however you want. A lot of people will actually tilt backward and they'll kind of play like this with their thumb like that. I've seen that very popular amongst a lot of different players. Again, it's completely up to you, but do experiment with it because the pick angle can really help you play smoothly on the strings instead of getting caught like you would if you play just straight flat on the string like that. So this is how I'm going to do it. You can kind of see what it looks like. So I have the pick angle slightly forward and down like that, and I'm going to play like this. If I just pick one string right here, this G string. Like that. You can kind of see what my hand is doing. I'm palm muting, so I have it kind of sitting on the strings right there. Something like that. Now, the reason why I'm palm muting, and again, don't have to do this. This is just something I'm choosing to do for this particular exercise. I really like palm muting with this sort of thing. I mean, it sounds cool. That's probably the main reason why I like doing it, but I also really like doing it because I can clearly hear the attack of the note, and I can clearly hear where I am in the tempo, where I am in the meter, because I'm really only hearing attack. Sometimes if you play a single note and let it ring out, like that, sometimes it can get maybe a little too noisy and the actual attack might be a little bit more lost or buried in the sound because there's a lot going on, especially if you have a ringing note like that. But if you palm mute, you really only hear the attack and a little bit of the pitch afterwards. So I find it a better way to kind of practice staying in time, especially when you're doing something like this. So again, you don't have to do that. I'm going to be doing it for this particular exercise. So you can do what I'm doing or you can do whatever you'd like. So yeah, so that's really what the technique is going to be. And again, we're double picking every single note. Now, something that's really important. I've done this exact exercise with a lot of students, and when they're playing slow, they can do it just fine. So let's say I'm playing 4 strings or 4 notes like this, just chromatic like that, right? If I did something like this, they can usually do that and handle it pretty well at the slow tempos. But once the tempo starts to build, what happens is they naturally lose track of what their right hand is doing, because if your right hand is moving quick, it's kind of hard to keep track of how fast or keep track of which stroke you're on because of how fast it is. And so what they end up doing is kind of a more of like a tremolo picking style, which if you're not familiar with tremolo picking, that's pretty much picking a string at kind of an indeterminate speed and you're just moving your left hand whenever you want. So that would be something like this. definitely a cool sound, nothing wrong with that, but that's not what we're doing right now. That's just me moving my hand fast and just changing the notes whenever I want. Remember, we are doing something very specific. 2 hits per note, 2 pick strokes per note. So we want to make sure that we're always sticking to that, even at the high tempos. And this is where the downstrokes come into play. Whenever we do this, it's just kind of like simple math. We have 2 particular strokes that we play for every note. So what does that mean? Whenever we change the note, it's always going to start over with the first stroke that we're using. And what's the first stroke that we're using? A downstroke. So that means whenever you switch notes in this whole exercise, you will always be using a downstroke as long as you start with a downstroke. Could you start with an upstroke? Of course you can. You can do whatever you want. But for this exercise, I'm going to start with a downstroke every time. So every time I switch notes, for example, these same 4 notes, watch my right hand. It's always downstroke. It's down and then up. So down, 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 down. Like that. Very simple. So when I'm playing slow, I can obviously think about both the down and the up. But when I'm playing fast, it's going to be hard to think about both of them. But I can still think about just that downstroke, right? Even if I'm playing quick. As long as I'm concentrating on the downstroke, like if I'm thinking down, 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 like that, and I can feel the downstrokes locking in with the changing notes, I know I'm in time. But if I'm playing and all of a sudden I feel like an upstroke happened when I switched a note, that tells me something happened. I messed up somewhere. I got off time. My hands are not synced up, and I need to go back, maybe slow it down, catch myself. But if I'm playing at the high tempos and I can really feel that downstroke every time, even if I'm playing like random notes, something like this. Like I can feel those downstrokes locking into those notes every time. Like I'm not actually saying this in my head, but I can feel down, 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 like that. I can kind of feel that locking in with my left hand. And as long as I feel that, I know I'm good because it's going to be lining up perfectly again, because every time I'm switching a note, it should be a downstroke, and I'm just sneaking in that extra upstroke right in the middle between those notes. So as long as you're thinking about that and you can feel those downstrokes every time you switch a note, you should be smooth sailing with this whole exercise. Of course, if you're having trouble getting to those top tempos, set a goal tempo, work up to that point, and then continue on once you're comfortable. So now that we've got the technique settled, let's get on to what these notes are. So this first part is a really easy pattern that just repeats the same sort of notes, but over 2 different chords. It's the same note structure, but just 2 different chords. And those 2 different chords are E minor and then D major. That's it. And it's mostly based on an arpeggio. So the pattern is going to look something like this. I'll start with the E minor, the first chord. So it looks like this. This is based off of a simple little minor arpeggio with the 3rd on top. So 3, 5, and then 1, flat 3 because we're playing minor. Right? So that's the first 3 notes. So just like that. And then I hit the flat 3 again. Really simple. That's just literally an E minor arpeggio with a 3rd on top, 5 on the bottom. So 3, 5, 1, 3. Really simple. After that, I jump up to the 5 and the higher octave, which is just a finger roll away from the flat 3 on here on the G string. So that looks like this. Like that. Play it one more time, a little slower. So a lot of finger rolling here. We've got the 3 right here, flat 3, the G, down to the B right here, D string 7th fret, hit it 2 times, roll the finger to grab the root of the E minor, the E, back to the flat 3, roll that finger to get the 5 of the B on the B string 12th fret. And then we're walking down the 5, 4, the A, flat 3 again, and then root. So that last little passage is just simply 5, 4, flat 3, 1. Again, we're playing all the notes twice. So the notes are B, A, G, E. So the whole thing, if I play it slow. I'll play actually just single notes. Check it out. Really simple. Again, if I'm double picking. The fingering is up to you, at least how you're doing it. Rolling the finger is fine, but if instead of rolling the pinky, which some people might find uncomfortable, you can always do it something like this. So pinky, pointer, roll the pointer to grab the root, then ring finger, and then pinky. Instead of rolling the pinky, grabbing both notes with the pinky, you can play ring, pinky, walk down like that if you want to do that. I actually don't know how I end up playing this, but it's going to be one of those. You can kind of figure out whichever one is comfortable. Speaking of fingering, to be honest, this is a pretty much literal arpeggio. It's 1, 3, 5, and that's pretty much it, except for this little lonely 4 right there that we play on the descent. Because of that, there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. You don't have to play it like this. For instance, instead of doing 3, 5, 1, you can do 3, 5, 1, right? That's the same exact thing. Or, right? Or you could do like 3, 5, 1. It's another way. Or you could do 3, 5, 1. Right? A lot of different ways to play this. It's not just the one way we're doing it right here. So feel free to experiment, see what kind of different sounds and fingerings you can get. You might find one that you prefer. So definitely do that. Again, what's the pattern? 3, 5, 1, 3, 5 up top, 4, 3, 1. That's it. And that's all over kind of an E minor sound. Then it's the exact same structure with a couple little additions over a D major sound. So let's get the basic structure for that. So if this was the minor arpeggio off of E minor, 3, 5, 1, 3, flat 3, of course, because we're playing minor. The major structure off of D, that's where D is, but this note is not flat anymore because it's major. It's now up a fret. So major 3, 5, 1, 3. It's exactly the same thing, just down and targeting a different chord. Right? So if I play the minor one versus the major one, it's the exact same structure. Third on top, 5, roll the finger for the 1, third again, and then we're even doing the next part the same. The 5 up top, which is now here, right? There's no rolling here because we're playing a normal 3 to the 5, whereas earlier we were playing flat 3 to a 5, and when you do that on the G and the B string, they're on the same fret, but if you play normal 3 to a 5, they are not on the same fret on the G and B string, so just slightly different. Again, 3, 5, 1, 3, up to the 5, pick it twice, of course, back to the 4, exactly the same, the 5 and 4, still the same distance apart, right? Then to the 3, same exact thing, except now we go to the 2 of D, which is the E again, and then we end on the 3, the F sharp, and that's the end of the exercise, or the end of at least this part of the exercise. So again, that second half looks something like this. I'll play it slow. Single notes. And we end right there. I'm also ending with my ring finger instead of pinky, and pinky would naturally feel good to end right there. Right? But I am preparing for the next part that we'll get into the next video, which ring finger I think makes a little bit more sense for that one. So do keep that in mind. Maybe try to get into the habit of ending on the ring finger as you play over the track for this video, because that's where we're going to start with the next part of this. So let me play both of those parts back to back. You can see what they sound like. I'll play it slow. Here we go. I'm actually going to play the notes single notes as well. I'm not going to double. Here we go. And that's the end. So now let me play it with the double pick. Again, experiment with the fingering. You can tell I'm doing some like light little position changes just to make it a little bit more comfortable. If that makes sense for you, definitely do that. Let's see what I'm doing exactly. So I'm playing that note with ring finger. Maybe, let's see. I think I am playing with ring finger for some reason. It's easy to get into that note with the ring finger, which means I got to do a little bit of stretch to grab that, but I don't really mind it. And then the next time I hit that note on the way back, I do play with my pinky. So ring, pointer, pointer, pinky, right? Again, I'm doing that as comfortable for me. Doesn't mean you have to do it. It's just something that I do. Experiment with your own fingering. Let's see what I do once I get here. Right, pretty simple. Pinky, roll the pointer finger, pinky again, ring, pointer, pinky, pointer, ring. That allows me to set up that ring finger a little bit better. Something like that. Again, experiment with the fingering. Find one that's smooth as you connect the two parts, and that's going to be the one you want to play. So again, that's going to sound like this. And then I'll hold that note again. Hold the note. Play a little slower. And that's it. Play that last note a little better. That's the whole exercise. So again, what are we doing? We're just outlining an arpeggio of two different chords. So E minor, 3, down to 5, root, 3, up to 5, 4, 3, 1. Same thing for the D major. 3 down to 5, 1, 3 up to 5, 4 back to 3, then the 2 sneaking in the little E right there, and then ending on this F sharp, which will spill over into the next chord. So that's pretty much how this is going to go. Again, make sure you're memorizing these. Maybe practice some single notes first, real slow by yourself with the metronome. And then when you're ready, you can come back to this part of the video, and then we'll start the track where we will build this up. I think I'm moving from 80 BPM to 150, and it's always going to be 16th notes. So we're 150 is kind of getting up into that sort of fast range. So, be prepared for that. But again, a great way to just get this started, maybe just play that first little bit, first 4 notes or so, and get that alternate picking, doubling every note feel into your hands, and then start to dive into the rest of the exercise. So maybe you could just do something like this. Just to get comfortable with the technique. Once it's comfortable, really start to dive into that. Make sure you're not accidentally hitting other strings, kind of like I was just doing right there. Make sure you're only hitting the string that you're targeting. Again, if you want to practice that, maybe just play one string and really feel those downstrokes. That's the key to really getting this exercise down. Just targeting those downstrokes and only feeling those downstrokes, especially when you're playing at those top tempos. So if you're ready, let's get on to that track. Again, 80 BPM to 150. Okay, that does it for part 1. Again, if you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below, and I'll see you guys in part 2.